You also mentioned that you have been in the cannabis business. Now, this is something which I have, due to being in the UK, very limited knowledge about. So can you tell me about how you got into that and what it's like?
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit of a nightmare, not gonna lie. But I got into it because I'd worked a lot with regulated products prior, and so I had spent a lot of time, building the camera drone channel in retail globally, and that was, we were in everyone from Harvey Norman to Australia to Fnac in France and Virgin, I forget. We were in Harrods in the UK and a few other places in the channel we were building. And so I was used to kind of regulated products because when we started the consumer drone space, the word drone was still like a bad word. You associated it more with a drone strike than you did with a drone camera. I think that perception's kind of now changed. And there was a lot of regulation and education around how consumers can use it, weight limits, how do you educate that kind of people at retail? It was really nuanced. And so it's the same thing with cannabis, where you have a complicated product people feel a lot of ways about. There's a ton of education. There's a ton of retail experience education. And so it was kind of a natural shift to move to another regulated market. The difference is in the US especially is that it's a really complex area to operate in because you are still federally illegal, even though you are state level legal, which means a lot of business operational challenges because, for instance, in your business, you can't write off operational expenses. You can only write off your cost of goods sold from a tax perspective, which means that your businesses are much more expensive to operate than any typical business. And then also you have trouble working with banks and you get charged, fees and people want to charge you more for your real estate. So everything just becomes inherently complicated. Certain services won't work with you for things like HR or marketing or, MailChimp doesn't want you sending emails, but you might be okay with this other service, that kind of thing. And so really you just deal with a lot of challenges every day. But when it comes down to it, it's a lot like any other consumer packaged goods industry from a marketing or product perspective. You want to create things that look good at retail. You want to educate the people at retail that are going to educate the consumers. You want to kind of create demand around the product. You want it to evolve. And it's an interesting space from that perspective. It's just surrounded by all these additional complications that make the industry really challenging.
And what do you make of some of the things you highlighted there? So, for example, merchants that wouldn't work with you or premises which are more expensive. What conclusions do you come to there?
I just think that, in any emerging industry, it's going to be a bit of the Wild West, where you're trying to find solutions to more complex problems, which I think is great for a certain type of entrepreneur. But I do think that it makes it really hard to run businesses there with any level of sophisticated planning. And so there's always just this kind of chaos factor that comes from, is this vendor going to get shut down? Am I going to get charged an exorbitant amount for this? That just makes operating on a day-to-day kind of really, really hard. And so that's not for everyone. And I think that there are people that can work through that and really make a name and a brand for themselves and do great. But many people get excited about that industry and want to go into it and realize they're doing one of the most complicated things you can do. And so I'd recommend for most, it's worth enjoying being a consumer, but you may not want to be in the industry.